The sky was bright that afternoon, but the sunlight did nothing to warm the hollow ache inside Sarah's chest. She stood on the corner of Maple Street, clutching her daughter's tiny hand as the city around them moved like a river that had forgotten they existed. Cars rushed past, faces hidden behind tinted windows, and the noise of life drowned out the sound of her quiet sobs. Her other hand trembled as she held a crumpled eviction notice, her last thread of normalcy torn apart by red ink that screamed final notice. She had nowhere left to go. Her 7-year-old daughter, Grace, looked up with wide, innocent eyes that didn't yet understand the cruelty of the world. Her little face was smudged with dirt, her shoes scuffed, and her small backpack hung loosely on her shoulders. They had been walking for hours, searching for a miracle in a city that had long since stopped offering them. When Sarah finally sank down onto a park bench, her knees weak from hunger and heartbreak, Grace climbed up beside her and wrapped her tiny arms around her mother's arm. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling, "please don't cry." Sarah pressed her lips together, trying to hold back the storm inside. "I'm sorry, baby. Mommy's just tired." Grace looked out across the park, her eyes scanning the strangers passing by, people with coffee cups, briefcases, and smiles that seemed so far away from their reality. Then, with a spark of hope lighting up her tear-streaked face, she pointed toward a man standing near a black luxury car parked by the fountain. He was tall, dressed in an elegant gray suit, speaking into his phone with a tone of authority. Everything about him screamed wealth, success, and power, the kind of man who never had to worry about where his next meal would come from. "Don't cry, Mommy," Grace said softly. "Maybe that man will help us," and in that instant, Sarah's heart broke even more, because she wanted to believe her little girl was right. If you believe in kindness, miracles, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, Echoes of Kindness. For a long moment, Sarah sat frozen, torn between pride and desperation. She had never begged before, never asked a stranger for help. Once, she had been a nurse, working long shifts and coming home to a modest apartment filled with laughter and warmth. But after her husband's accident, the medical bills piled higher than their hopes. He had fought for 2 years before the cancer took him, and when the debt collectors came, she lost everything except the only thing that mattered, Grace. Now, she was jobless, homeless, and standing at the edge of the same city that had once felt like home but now seemed to be pushing her out. The man by the fountain ended his call and turned to walk toward his car. Grace tugged at her mother's sleeve, her innocent eyes pleading. "Please, Mommy. Just ask him. Maybe he's nice." Sarah hesitated, tears blurring her vision. Finally, she stood and walked forward, her legs trembling. The man noticed her approaching and instinctively straightened, his brows knitting slightly. He looked like someone who wasn't used to being approached by strangers, especially ones in worn-out clothes and tired eyes. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah began softly, her voice barely steady. I'm sorry to bother you, but my daughter and I, we haven't eaten since yesterday. I'm not asking for money, just maybe if you could tell me where I could find a shelter nearby." The man studied her for a moment. His name was Ethan Cross, a name that appeared in business magazines and charity gala brochures. He was the CEO of a tech empire, known for his sharp mind and colder demeanor. To him, people always wanted something, an opportunity, a donation, a favor. But this woman's voice carried no demand, only exhaustion and sincerity. And that little girl beside her, she wasn't hiding behind her mother. She was smiling, shyly, hopefully, like she believed the world was still kind. "Do you have anywhere to stay tonight?" he asked after a pause. Sarah shook her head, embarrassment flooding her cheeks. "No, sir. I've tried calling the shelters, but they're full. It's fine, really. We'll figure something out." Ethan looked down at Grace, who was watching him with a quiet kind of trust. Something in that gaze reached a part of him he hadn't felt in years, a part buried under board meetings and broken memories. His wife had died 5 years ago, leaving him with more money than joy, and since then he'd built walls taller than skyscrapers. Yet now, this stranger's child had somehow found a crack in them. "Come with me," he said finally. Sarah blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. "What?" "I'll take you somewhere safe," he replied. "There's a community center I fund a few blocks away. They'll have food, beds, and someone who can help you get back on your feet." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak. Grace beamed, clutching her mother's hand tighter. The ride to the center was silent, except for Grace's soft hums as she watched the city lights blur past. Ethan stole a glance at them in the rearview mirror. Sarah sat quietly, holding her daughter close, her expression a mix of disbelief and gratitude. When they arrived, the staff immediately welcomed them thanks to Ethan's call ahead that night. As Sarah tucked Grace into a clean bed for the first time in weeks, she whispered a prayer. "Thank you, God, and thank you, whoever you are." Outside the center, Ethan lingered by his car longer than he intended. He told himself it was enough, he'd done his part. But as he drove home to his mansion on the hill, the image of that little girl's hopeful face wouldn't leave him. Over the next few days, Sarah began to rebuild, bit by bit. She volunteered at the same community center that had taken her in, helping other women find comfort and courage. Grace attended the center's little school program and quickly became a favorite with her cheerful nature. Ethan visited occasionally, under the guise of checking on the center's progress. But every time, he found himself talking to Sarah longer than planned. There was something about her strength in the face of struggle, her humility, her quiet resilience. It stirred something deep inside him. One afternoon, he arrived to find her outside, helping serve lunch to the homeless. She was laughing, her hair pulled back, a light returning to her face. For the first time in years, Ethan smiled, not his polite, business smile, but a real one. "Didn't expect to see you working here," he said as he approached. She looked up, surprised but smiling. "I couldn't just sit and take without giving back. This place, it gave me and Grace more than just food or shelter. It gave us hope." Ethan nodded slowly. "Hope can be powerful." "Yes," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "And it's contagious." Something changed between them that day, something unspoken but undeniable. Weeks turned into months. Sarah found part-time work at a clinic, and Grace flourished in school. Ethan kept in touch, finding excuses to visit, to help, to simply see them. But for Sarah, it was never about his money. What mattered to her was the kindness behind his eyes, the way he spoke gently to Grace, the way he listened. One evening, a heavy rain swept across the city. The community center lost power, and Sarah, who stayed late to help, was stranded. Ethan came to pick her and Grace up, insisting they stay at his home until the storm passed. His mansion, though beautiful, felt cold and lifeless until Grace ran through the halls giggling, and Sarah's soft laughter filled the air. For Ethan, it was the first time in years the house had felt like home. That night, after Grace fell asleep on the couch, Sarah sat quietly by the window, watching the rain. "You didn't have to do all this for us," she said. "We were strangers." Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said slowly, "sometimes strangers remind us of the parts of ourselves we've forgotten." Sarah's eyes softened, tears glistening. "You reminded me that good people still exist."